The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Hi, I'm Odeh Charney, and this is the Odeh Charney Report. And what is in the news this week? Unfortunately, some terrorism and some peace negotiations and some movement on the DOP, the Declaration of Principles, and we try to get you the best people we can find to give some insight as to what's happening with the peace process and with terrorism, what's going on in the Middle East. And we have the pleasure today to have the ambassador from Jordan to the United Nations. His name is Adnan Abu Odeh. And I'm not saying Odeh correctly, Oyedeh, but he'll excuse me. Right, Mr. Ambassador?
I think you are right. The pronunciation is good.
Good enough. You have a marvelous background. You've been a minister of information. You've been a senior advisor to the King of Jordan in foreign policy, I'll assume. You've been a minister of court. What's the difference, by the way? What is a minister of court? What exactly does that mean?
Well, this post has been eliminated now. It was eliminated, in fact, after I held it for 2 years. This post was created by late King Abdullah, the founder of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. At that time, in the late 40s and the early 50s, the Middle East as a whole was marked by ruling dynasties here and there. So every monarch would have a minister of court to look after the court. But the job description has changed over the years in Jordan. Maybe it started at the beginning to describe the job of the Minister of Court as being the one to look after the ambassadors, the ceremonies. But over the years, it has changed. It became a post of someone who would be an advisor to His Majesty the King. And King Hussein, at one point, when I was the Minister of Court, he thought that why not to give things their real names. Now you are an advisor. You are not doing something that has to do with the court as such. And
was your office in a palace?
Yes. The Minister of Court or the political advisor is one of the senior staff members of the king. So the post changed from Minister of Court to political advisor in my time. I was the one. I went one day, I was Minister of Court. The next day, I became political advisor.
Middle East voodoo.
But it was more in conformity with the modernization, with the change of the age, especially in the Middle East.
Give me your impressions, and I know that you're an ambassador for a country, and it's Jordan, so therefore you have to speak what the country party line is, the country line is, not the party line. What was the feeling of the Jordanian government on September 13th, or let's go back 5 days, when they first understood that there was a possibility of signing a declaration of principle? Did they feel like they were left out of this?
Yes, they had this feeling, especially that Jordan was supposed to be with the Palestinians, consisting one group. The delegation to the bilateral talks was called the Jordanian-Palestinian delegation. So, that means that we were supposed to be partners. And all of a sudden, we discovered that our partner was doing something else without letting us know about what they were doing. And that was not taken easily by the government at that time.
Why do you think it happened that way?
Well, I think a lot of literature has been written, political literature has been written on that later on. I would believe what the Israeli analysts said about it. It had to do more with Israel than with the PLO. The Israelis, at the beginning, when they, coordinated with the American administration under Bush administration, when they coordinated for designing the peace process, the Americans were aware that it would have been difficult for the Shamir government at that time to have them talk to the Palestinians as independent group. So they came up with the idea of having a Jordanian-Palestinian delegation. And the Israelis, as some Israeli analysts said later, thought at the time that one day, through the Palestinian delegates in the negotiations, they might expect to have a new Palestinian leadership that would displace the PLO from outside. But along the road, they discovered that it was impossible to displace the PLO. And those people, though they were efficient, were unable to deliver. And they noticed that anything that they had to decide or to say through the negotiations, they had to refer it first to Tunis, where the PLO leadership is stationed now, and then to come back to Washington and give the opinion or the position of the Palestinians. I think that was one of the reasons why the Israeli government was encouraged to open a channel with the PLO. And when they opened that channel, it seems, they discovered that they could do business with the PLO. And then, you know, the rest of the story.
The rest is history. Out of Norway. Many Palestinians that I talk to tell me that they would be willing to have a confederation with Jordan. I never hear what Jordan says about a confederation. So now that I have you, what is your feeling about that?
Well, let me say two things. First, the official position of Jordan now is that they don't say no to the confederation, nor do they say yes. They say the confederation...
That's pretty Jewish, by the way. Not yes, not no, you know, can't make up your mind. So we are cousins after all.
Yeah, that's right. The Jordanian official position is that the confederation would be a contractual relationship between two peoples. Let us see what will come out of those negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis, to see what kind of people will rule there, what kind of system will arise before we commit ourselves to this contractual relationship. And after that, if that happens, I mean, if down the road a new Palestinian entity does emerge, then it would be more practical and more logical to see the two peoples, both in Palestine and in Jordan, to decide what kind of relationship they will work out between themselves. So this is the Jordanian position. Now, talking about the confederation, I think, is not without good logic, is not without pragmatic thinking. Because the relationship between the Palestinians, especially the Palestinians of the West Bank, and Jordan is an organic one. It has developed over the years, not only after the two banks merged into the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan in 1950, but even before that, due to historical reasons, trade, due to the political reasons, like, for example, the fact that both of them were taken care of by the British. They had the same coin, same currency, I mean. So there were those relationships even before the merger of the two banks into one.
They antedate everything.
Yes. So, and over the years, for example, look at me. I am from the West Bank. I'm from Nablus. Yeah,
I
that's
noticed.
right. And I am now the representative of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan to the UN. And there are so many Palestinians in Jordan who are incorporated in its economy, incorporated in Jordan politically.
So you think it's a possibility in the future, but the comment now, or the political line of the country right now is not yes and not no, in the middle.
Exactly, waiting for what kind of an outcome.
You'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Yeah.
All right, we'll be back in a minute after a commercial break to continue a very important discussion with the ambassador from Jordan to the United Nations. More importantly, he's had very close relationships and posts with the King of Jordan, who, as everyone knows, is the ruling monarch of that Hashemite Kingdom. He has a lot to say, so don't leave us. We're back. I'm Leon Charney. I'm speaking with the Jordanian ambassador from, obviously he's from Jordan, to the United Nations. His name is Adnan Abu Odeh, and I'm pronouncing it a little bit better, I hope. In any case, he was born in Nablus, Palestine. His father was a mini industrialist, but basically a laborer in a soap factory, and this man had worked his way through to a few ministries, political advisor to the king, and now ambassador from Jordan to the United Nations, which is a very important post from Jordan. Am I correct?
Well,
that would be
yeah.
self-praise, so you don't want to do that. Let's go back to some political issues, because it's important that the public hear your side and your point of view. The scuttlebutt in town is that Shimon Peres has basically initialed the document with the Jordanian government in terms of having a peace agreement, peace settlement with, and even recognition of Israel. Any truth to this?
Well, Mr. Peres, who I would describe as a man of vision, he had and he has his vision of a Middle East that enjoys peace. And for that purpose, in the past, he came up with many initiatives. And I think one of those initiatives was a concept of how relationships could be between Israel and Jordan. I think the most concrete factor in this context is the fact that a trilateral committee was set up after October 1st. I refer to October 1st as the day when in Washington, D.C., a conference under the name of Donors Conference was held after the Declaration of Principles, 15 days or 2 weeks
to
after.
pump money into the area.
Yes, and out of that conference, at the level of Jordan, Israel, and America and the United States, a trilateral committee was set up between the three countries to look into ideas and concepts about the future relationship, especially in the economic field, between Jordan and Israel. And that is, so far, the most, in my opinion, the most concrete thing, because it has created a new dynamic of the peace process, at least within the Israeli-Jordanian relationship, or within the Israeli-Jordanian bilateral path they are going together.
You don't have any problems meeting with Israelis today, do you?
Yes, of course I do, because I am not the one who is, not me, I mean, personally me, I'm not supposed to meet Israelis. Those who meet with Israelis are the ones who are entrusted with the task of negotiations. I'm not a member of the negotiating team.
But person to person, would you have any problem?
Well, person to person, neither an Israeli nor myself, I mean, within a social surrounding at the UN, you know, a seminar, and a symposium, we see each other, we talk to each other, we argue with each other.
It's better to argue than carry a gun.
Well, yeah, of course.
See how intelligent I am? That's why I do this show, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
It's called an IQ test for a moderator.
Yeah, that's the thing we really look for, to replace guns with debate and arguments.
The King of Jordan has always enjoyed great empathy from people. He's been a great survivor. He seems to be, in a way, a benevolent leader to his people. And he always seems to make the sort of the right moves. Even if they're the wrong at that time, they come out okay, vis-a-vis to the United States now. When you joined Iraq in the Gulf War, I mean, that was a dangerous move with you people. I understand it probably was for economic reasons because you do a lot of trade with Iraq. Yet the King of Jordan has come back to the United States, and I think you're in good standing again. How does he?
Well, let me deny that we stood beside Iraq.
Okay.
Well, that has been the impression that was perpetuated here.
Right.
You know, during the confrontation period,
Yeah.
which continued for 6 months.
Right.
We did not side with Iraq.
Is that right?
Of course, we did not side with Iraq, but
You stayed neutral.
we did not side with the alliance.
The typical move.
Yeah, so we didn't side with anybody. We sided only with one thing.
You don't confirm, you don't deny. You stay in the middle.
Yeah, no, we sided with one thing, that we were against the occupation of another country. Simply, I mean, because we are a small country ourselves.
What's
We
population?
identify, we are now 4 million people. After we received 300,000 Jordanians, mostly from Palestinian origin, who were expelled from Kuwait. Now we are 4 million people, but we are a small country with meager resources. I mean, the natural thing is that we identify with weak, small countries. So, I mean, it would have been crazy for us to side with somebody who would...
well, I tell you, not so weak. If you resist the pressure of James Baker, the Secretary of State, and George Bush, you're not so weak. I mean, it's not exactly Nebuch the child here, you know?
Well, I mean,
it was a policy
we
decision.
continue to be, we try to be, to have our independent policy, especially when it comes to our national security. But the fact, of the historical fact, is that we didn't side with Iraq in their invasion of Kuwait, nor did we side with the alliance, because we thought that we could have solved this problem within the Arab League.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, it happened. I mean, it was a coincidental event that King Hussein at that time was the head or the president of what we used to call the Arab what you call it?
Council of Arab States?
Yeah, Council of Arab States, which comprised Egypt, Jordan, Yemen, and Iraq. King Hussein at that time was the president. So as a president, I mean, the only logical thing that would occur to you is that to try to solve it yourself within your group, or perhaps within the broader context that is the Arab League. And that was our position. But anyway, I think that was well understood later by the Americans. And that's why our stand. And we have a good asset of credibility as a stabilizing power in the area, as a moderate power in the area, as a third world country that tries its best to modernize, to make progress, to lead the people towards a better life. We had, and still we have, and will continue to have our way of life as a free country, as people who believe in dialogue and democracy. So I guess this asset of ours is adequate enough to make us once again acceptable as a partner for dialogue, for cooperation, and for partnership.
All right, we're going to cut for a commercial break, and we'll come right back and continue our discussion with the ambassador from Jordan to the United Nations, who's had a marvelous career, as I said before. He's been in a lot of political spots advising the king, which is a very important job. Don't leave us.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Get the book that inspired the award-winning movie, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish.
We're back. I'm continuing our conversation with Ambassador Abu Odeh, the charismatic ambassador from Jordan to the United Nations, who's giving us some very important insights into the Middle East right now, stuff that we have really never heard, and I don't think American newspapers cover that well. I think even the fact of what you told me before about the Americans really think that you abandoned us, and that you really didn't. You just took a neutral position, so to speak, and you said, well, we have another alternative, and it was perceived in this country as an abandonment. Yasser Arafat, interesting man. Some people think that he may not be able to transform himself from being a leader of an organization to a leader of a governmental authority, and that he may not be able to control his whole population. Any visionary thoughts on that?
I think it's both unfair and premature to give such a judgment. Because now Arafat is in transitional period between the leader of a revolution or an organization on his way to become a leader of a nation on the ground. I mean, you cannot say that he has failed or he is unable to do the role of the leader, of the ruler, of the statesman until he is there on the ground. He is not on the ground yet. And I guess all that we hear about this is something that falls in the sphere of speculation. To me, it does not emanate from substantive, concrete realities. All we see...
Does he call the king for consultations on the moves that he's making now?
Well, only yesterday he was in Amman. Yes, he does, but how much? I don't know. It seems that in Amman,
very recently,
we're a little bit skeptic about the size of consultation. But yesterday he was in Amman. I hope this process of consultation might pick up and become more intensive. For a number of reasons. Mainly, I mean, whatever we say, wherever we go, one day a certain relationship has to emerge or to develop institutionally. And the fate and destiny of the Palestinians and the Jordanians, to me, look to be the same. So I think coordination is very necessary and consultation.
Is there any residual backlash in the country itself because of the Black September period when you basically had to throw the whole Palestinian PLO out, I mean, to save the country?
Yeah, well, I think the Black September factor is now being blurred by a number of events. One of them, or by a number of factors, one of them is the passage of time itself. I mean, we are talking about almost a quarter of a century.
Time is a healer.
Time is a healer. This is one thing. Another thing is the fact that the September issue is understood by many elders as a fight not between Palestinians and Jordanians. It was a fight mainly, it was a fight between the establishment, the government, and the dissidents. It was between law and order and anarchy and chaos. It was not really, but the media like to do it so, and because on both sides of the divide you had Jordanians and Palestinians. I mean, I was a member of the cabinet of September, myself, yes. And on the other side you had so many Jordanians who were with the Fidaiyin at that time.
Fidaiyin, right.
So, well, the media wanted to portray it or to depict it as Jordan versus Palestinians. And some people benefited from that, and they tried to promote it over the time and to perpetuate it and to establish it in the minds of the people. And people started to write about Jordanian-Palestinian fighting. To me, for example, at the time when I was picked up as a member of the military cabinet, which was established in September 15th, at that time, and I was taken from the intelligence department because His Majesty the King planned to have a military cabinet that represented A, all the military corps, B, all the regions, to be comprehensively representative. So I was the one who was chosen from the intelligence to be a member of the military cabinet.
That's how you really got into politics?
Yes, that's true.
From the military?
Yeah, from the mukhabarat, we call it, from the intelligence. In fact, I was in the section of assessment and analysis. So I was aware of what was going on, personally. I knew how things were deteriorating. And on September 15th, if you asked me before I became, one hour before I became a minister, how would you describe the situation? I would tell you it's a situation where anarchy is prevailing over law and order. So it was a fight between law and order on one side.
And the king had to make that move.
Of course, it was his responsibility to, that is the source of the legitimacy of every ruler in the world, is to provide his people with law and order.
The role of Assad in the Middle East, how powerful is that? You, by the way, were educated in Damascus, weren't you?
I was, yes. I got my BA in Damascus University.
Did you learn English in Damascus too?
Well, yes. Yes, I learned English in Damascus, but in fact, my basic English I picked when I was a student under the British mandate, because
the schooling.
I mean, I was in 1948. According to here, I was in the 9th grade, according to the American system. Of course, under the British mandate, we studied English language, and we studied more of the English history than of the Arab history at that time.
We'll cut for a commercial break, then we'll go back and talk about Hafez al-Assad, the president of Syria, who everybody thinks is a major player, and I'd like your assessment on it. We'll be back in 1.5 minutes after commercial break to find out the assessment of the power of the president of Syria. Don't leave us.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Get the book that inspired the award-winning movie, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels.
We're back. We're continuing our one-on-one conversation with the ambassador from Jordan to the United Nations, Ambassador Abu Odeh, and we're talking now in generic terms about President Assad of Syria. What kind of player is he in the Middle East?
I think he's a crucial player, one of the most important players in the Middle Eastern politics. And now, when the peacemaking is the topic of the day and the most important event that's taking place. President Assad and Syria represent one of the most important actors because nobody of us can imagine a comprehensive peace, a durable peace, without Syria being a partner to that peace.
There are some people in Israel I know who think that the first move should have been a peace treaty with you, Jordan, with Syria, and with Lebanon, and then to bring in the Palestinians instead of going the opposite way. You think that would have made it easier to get the peace moving?
I really wonder how much this sort of thinking is valid when we talk about peace in the Middle East. In fact, what we are after is comprehensive peace. We, the Arab side, have defined the comprehensive peace as one that involves all the actors. And the all actors are the ones who have common borders with Israel. It has to involve them all. And it has to be comprehensive in the other sense, that land for peace formula to be implemented. And normal relations are to emerge in view of that. So whether you start with Jordan or you start with Lebanon, the idea is that to have them all at one point, all the actors, Israel on one side and the Palestinians, Jordanians, the Syrians and the Lebanese on the other hand, reach peace treaties. Because you know, the type of issues that are being tackled in the peace process is such that requires a kind of a comprehensive peace. The fact that we have multilateral talks and bilateral talks emphasizes that. If we look at the topics of the multilateral talks, you find water, you find arms control, economic development, energy and the environment. And these issues mean one thing, that they are of regional nature. So when we talk about issues of regional nature, then we are talking about comprehensive peace. You cannot, in other words, solve the problem of water between Israel and Jordan.
I was just going to ask you about water. It's a huge problem out there.
Sure, it is. Without solving it with Lebanon, between Syria and Israel, between the Palestinians and Israel. So everybody is involved in the question of water. So we are talking, how can you reach a peace treaty, a peaceful settlement without solving water? Water, in 1967 was one of the factors that caused the war. 1967, and now it might be a more inflammable material in the Middle East.
I have heard people in Israel tell me that in 2 years, if they don't solve the water problem, I mean, it is really dangerous.
It is very dangerous because, you know, the population growth in the area is so high. In Jordan, like in Syria, I think the rate of population growth is 3.5. That's a high percentage. And at the same time, urbanization is going on. You know, with urbanization, with better public hygiene, with growth of population, water suffers. So the water shortage is increasing. And I think this is one of the most important and one of the most crucial problems that should be addressed comprehensively. And without it, you cannot reach a comprehensive peace.
I think everybody agrees on. Everybody who lives in the Middle East understands that. How much is the budget for defense in Jordan?
It's almost 25%.
25.
Yeah, maybe.
If you had peace, would it go down
Well,
much?
excuse me. Maybe I'm trying to. I'm still having a figure that I had 3-4 years ago.
Israel's a 65.
Yeah. Yeah. To be true, maybe that was a figure I had 3-4 years ago. I don't know it now. But
would you be able, if you had a peace treaty with Israel, would you be able to save money in your defense and use it for social purposes?
Sure. This would be one of the blessings of peace.
During Camp David, in which I was playing a little bit of a role, one of the things that Sadat used to tell us was that he needed to transform all that money that he's putting into the military into his population, to the infrastructure, etc. And a question arises, during that period when he took that great step and made peace with Israel, he was banned, ostracized by all the Arab countries, including Jordan, I believe. Mm-hmm. Today your relationships are good.
Yes, between Jordan and Egypt the relationships are normal. In fact, it was His Majesty King Hussein who took the initiative in trying to redress that rupture within the Arab camp that resulted from the Camp David Accords. And in Amman in 1987, an Arab Summit conference was held, in which King Hussein was the president, and he did his best to open the way for reconciling Egypt with the Arabs and reconciling Arabs with Egypt. And since then things went very well.
Tell me a little bit about the democratic process in Jordan. You have a parliament, you have a lower house and an upper house?
Right. Yes.
And the final, then you have a prime minister that's chosen from the parliament?
Not necessarily.
Or he can, okay,
Not
fill me in.
necessarily. Not necessarily. You could have him from parliament, could have him from outside. But in both cases, the government, the prime minister and his ministers, should get a vote of confidence from the parliament. If they don't give him the vote of confidence, then His Majesty has to choose another one.
So the parties go to the king and say, we have a majority in parliament and we want to select the prime minister, or the king says, we think that this man should be prime minister?
You know, it is His Majesty the King who tries to study the map, the political map at that moment, to see who would be the one that fits in the phase, in the period of time we are living, and who could at the same time gain a vote of confidence from the parliament. If it happens, it happened, I think, once in the past, that one of the prime ministers couldn't get a vote of confidence and the king had to change. So it hasn't happened. This present government, the prime minister chose not to have a single member of parliament in his cabinet. And he won a vote of confidence by 41 out of 80, just on the
Is there 80 in your lower house? In how many in the parliament?
We have 80 members of parliament.
And the Senate?
40, half.
Do the senators vote, or is that sort of House of
Lords? No, it's the parliament.
It's
Because
like
the parliament, members of parliament are elected. So they are the ones to give the vote of confidence.
The Senate
is an appointive job.
It's like the House of Lords. It's an
It's,
honorary job?
it's an appointive job. It has its own prerequisites, ranging from age into performance in the national life.
And do they have a purpose except other than to advise?
No, they legislate. I mean, we have, if a bill is to pass, it should pass first by the lower house.
And
then it should pass also by the upper house.
oh, really?
If the upper house rejects to pass it, it should go back to the lower house.
So they can reach an agreement.
To reach an agreement. And if it does not, I mean, if the lower house doesn't change its position, both of them have one common session, and they have to vote.
Joint session.
Yeah, joint session.
Interesting. All right, we'll cut for commercial break, and we'll return with Ambassador Abu Odeh from Jordan to the United Nations, who's making his first appearance on the Leon Charney Report. Stay tuned.
The Middle East is not going to be the same again. The clock cannot be turned back.
We're back. I'm talking with Ambassador Abu Odeh from Jordan to the United Nations, and we're getting some keen insights into what is going on in the Middle East and what the future bodes in terms of the Middle East. I'll tell you what's going on in the Middle East, cable television. And you're an old television personality, or person. You ran the television in Jordan, am I correct?
Yes.
Have you got cable in?
No, not yet. Now, I think there are a number of companies who are interested to have cable television. They are about to start. But I'm not in the picture of the details.
Do you, I know you receive Israel television in Jordan, as the Israelis see Jordan every night. I know the English news comes to Israel from Jordan every night. Do most Jordanians tune into Israeli television, or it depends on the movie?
Yes, I must say that many Jordanians are tuned to the Israeli news bulletin. The Israeli news bulletin is very interesting to the Jordanian people.
Why?
I think they see in it a picture of how democratic political life goes. And they like it. They like also the shows like this show, when you get panelists and you ask them questions from various parties, from the whole parts of the political spectrum
of
spectrum in Israel, and they like the way how they talk, and they listen to them. And on the other hand, the Israelis, as I know, they like many of our programs.
I like some of your jazz shows. When I'm in Jerusalem, I hear Jordan radio, some of the jazz. You have some very good pop shows.
Yes, we have, yes. And it was me, in fact,
my producer's in love with one of your, what do you call it? He sees a woman on television and he thinks she's beautiful, so I have a hard time. I can't take him to Jerusalem. That's
maybe he likes our Arabic programs there, where we have good belly dancers, perhaps, maybe. Yeah, so I think both peoples view each other's television, and that indirectly and perhaps inadvertently, over the years, have created some kind of a common ground of thinking.
Wow. It opened up
It's
something.
like visiting the same museum, where people, in a museum you see realities.
Right.
Especially realities of history. And the more people see the same museum, see the same realities of history, inadvertently, indirectly, they develop an area of common thinking, of common impression, of common attitude, perhaps.
I think you're right. It's sort of the ping-pong diplomacy on television.
Yeah.
And you start to learn to accept and understand, and there's a relationship that develops. Even it can be inadvertently, if you don't even want to do it. You
Exactly.
try to resist it, but with communications the way they go today, it's impossible not to do it.
That's true.
I'm sure that you have a stock exchange in Jordan.
Yes, we do.
I know, and there are people that invest there, and these
Yes, they do.
worldwide growth funds that get into underdeveloped countries. I know that they trade Jordanian stocks. You wouldn't believe this 20 years ago when you were sitting in your Black September military cabinet that your stock 20 years from now would be trading in New York with the
Well,
Dreyfus Fund, you know?
Life changes.
Life changes. I mean, there could be a time when there'll be a Jordanian-Israeli exchange of stock too. I mean, this is very possible.
I wouldn't rule out this possibility.
No, I think it's very possible. I think it could come. There is a very sensitive issue for everyone called Jerusalem.
Oh, yes, of course.
And you have written a very deep and penetrative article about it in the Council on Foreign Relations Journal. Am I correct?
yes, that was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And basically you said it could be one capital but divided. You have an interesting concept.
No, I was talking about two capitals, but in an undivided city. In fact, the concept is the following. The basic concept is that I sanctified the walled city of Jerusalem.
Yes.
And I politicized the rest of Jerusalem.
So you sanctified the holy places, and
I sanctified the walled city because all the holy places, fortunately enough, are within the walled city. So they are well identified, and that's very helpful. And I think the other idea, the other concept I picked up was the fact that we call Jerusalem as Arabs a name, and the Israelis call it another name. We call it Al-Quds al-Sharif, they call it Yerushalayim. And the world knows it as Jerusalem.
right.
So my idea is that the sanctified city is Jerusalem. Because for you, for anybody who stays or outside that area, when you say Jerusalem to him, certainly he doesn't think of a disco here or a hotel there. All he thinks or she thinks of are the holy places. So that's Jerusalem.
One of the things that you said in your article, I believe, is that they should tackle that problem immediately and not forestall it.
Yes, I thought that.
We got 1 minute.
I have my approach to these things.
I know it's a sensitive topic. The Israeli government's position, and most Israelis' position, is that they want a united Jerusalem, and that's it. I know Sadat once talked about having a flag on top of a mosque as a symbolism. I think it is the most difficult problem to get to, the most difficult problem to solve, and I'm sure that you people also understand that. So it's going to take a lot of goodwill and cooperation to try and find some Salamic vision as to how Jerusalem should be solved. Maybe I shouldn't use Solomon, maybe you have your own king.
I think it is the disputants that make it that difficult. I mean, if they read my article, if you have really the true will to solve, you will come up with ideas.
We got to leave on that note. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I'd like you back in about 6 months. We'll analyze what's happening.
I will do that.
We got a commitment.